Welcome to a brand new episode of Human Can Opener, a podcast focused on interviewing interesting people in the ever-growing Disco Elysium sphere of influence. As many indie devs often do, today's guest has worn many different hats in the pursuit of creating games, taking the lead on the Russian localization of Disco Elysium, but more commonly known to most people for working at Russian indie studio Icepick Lodge, namely writing for and translating Pathologic 2, and now taking on the role of narrative lead on Pathologic 3. Welcome to the podcast, Alphyna.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, that's me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes, thank you very, very much. There are lots of people very, very excited about this. So, really, really glad to have you on. So, how I've set it out, I've obviously sent you over a bunch of questions ahead of it. So, you should have an idea of some of the stuff that's coming your way. And I've set it out into all three sections. I'd like to, like I do with everybody, get to know you a little bit and how you kind of came to be involved with games and all the rest of it. We'll, of course, talk about Icepick Lodge and Pathologic, and then we'll talk about Disco Elysium because that's kind of what we do here, right? And I know you're a big fan. So, as I said already, most of us know you as a game developer, and I'd like to ask, first of all, when did you first start playing games? When did you first have a controller or a mouse and keyboard in your hand, Alpha?
Well, funnily enough, I first played with a controller in like 2020, I think.
Okay.
My first ever controller game was Dark Souls 3. Which also incidentally was my first Souls-like. I fell in love with the game, tried playing it, I failed miserably. I realized you sort of need a controller to play it better, so I went out and bought it. Up until that point, I have always been this very typical PC gamer, and I've always played games with mouse and keyboard. I first started playing games when I was very young, like, I don't know, 7 or 10 maybe. I didn't have neither a computer nor any console, but up until that point, I was a very typical PC gamer, always played with mouse and keyboard. And my I started playing games very young, when I was like 7 or 10 maybe, and computer club culture was budding in Russia back then, so me and my friend Kira would spend our lunch money on going to a computer club and playing games instead of eating, and we would play, I don't know, like Diablo 2 and Warcraft 2, so basically Blizzard games.
Yep.
And then our money would run out, and we would stay at the computer club and watch boys play Counter-Strike, which was a separate funny activity because we very much enjoyed playing. But it was also... So we were like two very young girls, like 10-year-old girls. And obviously the boys who played CSGO there were a bit older, and like... You can probably imagine the demographic. But funnily enough, it was clear that they had fun when two young girls were watching them, because, you know, they had an audience, and obviously, like, streaming didn't exist back then, and we created this sort of audience that they could boast to in front of each other. And even though, of course, they were smoking and swearing and everything else, they were unexpectedly kind to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this like the old school LAN party setup, right? Where you have a load of PCs all connected through LAN cables in like in a little yeah. I used to love that. There used to be like a little game store in a town I grew up in, and you'd go down into like the basement, and it would just be full of guys doing exactly that, smoking, drinking, swearing, and playing Counter-Strike. Good times.
Well, I don't come from a particularly rich family, so we couldn't afford to even have a PC or console for quite a while. But like, no regrets, because honestly, I think that computer club culture was awesome, because these days people can very easily connect via games through streaming, through online play, and everything like that. And it wasn't that simple back then in Russia. Even the even online games that existed were not necessarily available to people. So it was a very unique form of connection between people to come to a computer club together and play a game.
Yeah, nice. So, do you have a favorite game of all time then? Is it something from that period, or is it something more recent?
I don't know. I feel like if you say if you are a cinephile, you can't have one single favorite movie, and if you like reading, you can't have one single favorite book. That's just not how it works, because there are always a number of works that are too important to be left out. But my ultra simplified answer is Bloodborne. But it's like, if I have to choose, okay, let it be Bloodborne. But obviously, like, there are way too many games that are good, that have made an impact on me, and that are important for culture, to just have one favorite.
Okay, is there any other? So I am a big wuss when it comes to Souls-like games, right? I tried Bloodborne. I was very, very bad at it, and I turned away. I keep promising people I'll try Elden Ring to get into it properly, but I haven't made that leap yet. So is there anything else that springs to mind that's important to you that you think deserves a mention? I know that you've obviously said there's too many to mention. So is there any other that you'd like to give an honourable mention to?
Just tell me, like, how many I am allowed.
You name as many as you like.
Okay, fair enough. So, okay, apart from Disco Elysium, which is a very important video game, I think, among games that have made an important impression upon me, I would name Planescape Torment. Not unexpected, maybe. It was the very first video game that made me cry, even though, like, you know, it's isometric and all, and not voiced. I have replayed it recently, and I was deeply impressed with how, I think this is the actually only classic RPG I've played where every side story tries to be thematically connected to the main story. So, you know, it's kind of like classic, well, it's not classic fantasy, but still, Planescape is a fantasy setting. And yet, way too many video games with robust plots, like, I don't know, say The Witcher and stuff like that, have a lot of side stories that can be great, that add flavor to the setting, that can be good stories in and of themselves, but they still kind of like exist separately from each other. In Planescape Torment, every single side character somehow explores this idea of identity or names or memory. Basically, the important, the crucial bits for the main story. And I really, really appreciated how it was done, because a lot of, I don't see it discussed enough, but a lot of, have you played Planescape Torment?
Haven't, no. To my shame.
Well, do you know the premise?
I know that your main character wakes up with zero memory, right? And that's kind of...
Yeah, well, that's like half of video games.
Yeah, especially that genre.
Okay, the premise is that you are an undead character in this sort of city that's a crossroads for a number of fantasy worlds in this setting, and you wake up without a memory. True, but the actual story is that you can't die. Even if you want to. And the story is to explore how you came to be immortal and who had to suffer for you to become immortal, and then come to terms with it. And either have your redemption or not. Either accept death or not. It's a very good story. But again, so sorry, I was kind of getting ahead of myself.
No, it's all right, yeah.
What is so there are a lot of very good stories in video games, but what I really like about Planescape Torment, again, is the structure. Is that the very small side characters always reflect on the main story and the struggle of the main hero, and with that, the game doesn't have to create situations for him personally. So, like, if you want to explore the subject of identity, you don't necessarily have to have all issues related to identity happen with your main character. They can happen with side characters and still be kind of reflections of the main theme. And Planescape Torment does this wonderfully. It's a big game for the time, so obviously not without flaws, but really like how it's structured. In a similar vein, I'd say Soma is doing the same. Have you played?
Okay, I haven't. No, this is like the kind of horror walking simulator type. Yeah.
Well, it's actually a very funny story, because originally it was, and it is, this sort of stealth horror, because it has sections with monsters that you need to avoid, and they kind of make the story worse. Which made a mod removing, well, not removing them, but like removing death, making them not dangerous. The mod became very popular, and then developers added this sort of walking sim mod in the game officially, because that's that's funny. But yes, so the story of the game is spoiler alert, because it's kind of not obvious from the first act. You wake up at an underground station, and I'm sorry, you wake up in an underwater station. It's kind of unclear what happened to everyone and humanity, and you need to explore this huge half-empty underwater station, realizing that it seems that humanity has died out, question mark, and you're not necessarily human yourself, question mark, and everyone around you kind of is very confused about what they are and what is happening with themselves. So basically it's very well done classic modern sci-fi about like the nature of being human and whatnot. It sounds trite, but the game is really good. And again, it's very good because the side stories in the game reflect the same subjects as the main hero's path, their journey. So I suppose that's what I appreciate. Then again, there are a number of games so I up until now I've named very narrative driven games, but honestly, as a kind of like game designer as well, like you said, I'm wearing many hats. I honestly uh, suppose that I appreciate games that tell stories through game design even more than games with just good narratives. So, for example, for a while, when I was asked what the best, not my favorite, those are different things, what the best game ever is, I would say Paper, Please, because I think it's a game that creates a very unique experience. It makes you it makes you empathize.
Empathize, yes.
Yeah,
Even I got it wrong as well. Yeah.
With a bureaucrat, like a person everyone hates. That guy sitting at customs and like taking half an hour to look through your documents and stamp them, and like obviously we'll find these people annoying, and again, maybe not like that where you live, but in post-Soviet countries, these people kind of, there exists this culture of these sorts of people being rude to others, because like they have this sort of local power and authority, and you are dependent on them anyway, so they don't have to be polite to you, so sometimes they aren't, and everyone hates them basically. And this is a game that forces you into the shoes of a bureaucrat and makes you do extremely boring tasks for a while, so you have to like stay ultra focused on like comparing two stamps in a document, and this is incredibly stressful and boring, and the time is ticking, and your family may die of hunger if you don't do it in time, so obviously you will snap at people. And like having played that game has actually made me a better person, because I think I realized the struggle of some people better. And the cool thing is, it has very little story, as in, like dialogue and stuff like that. So the experience is created through gameplay, through the stuff that you do as a player. So that's one more thing, for example, that I appreciate in gaming.
It's an amazing list, and it's a list of games that I haven't played. So now I have to go and do that.
You have my full endorsement to do that.
Thank you. No, there's an interesting selection, and it's interesting that you find a lot of joy in particular the stuff that thematically connects together throughout the story. Because I think people would argue that they've seen evidence of your enjoyment of that in the work that you've done yourself. So I find that particularly interesting. So when did you actually take the leap from being someone who was just playing and enjoying games and actually start to think about being a game developer?
The way I entered the industry is kind of typical for the time, when the industry was not an industry yet, at least not in Russia. I never planned to become a game developer. I was a gamer, like a lot of people of my generation, like just enjoyed playing games. I did some cosplay, I did some game journalism, and then I just sort of happened to get to know Nikolai, the then lead of I Speak Lodge, who like I had a journalistic task. It was very simple. I think I was writing an article on video game towns and cities Like I was analyzing how they were created and stuff, and I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about the town on Gorhon,
Yep.
where the events of Pathologic take place. So I got a hold of the studio's contacts, and then I don't know. We just again, it was very typical for the times. We just kind of became like online pals. So we would just discuss stuff on Skype, which was
It's
alive.
gone now. Yeah, it's dead now.
Yeah. RIP. I don't know. We would just chat about random stuff, and then one of the bits of the random stuff we were discussing was how the studio has made a game called Knock Knock, and they would tell me like, "Hey, we made this cool game. Check it out. You'll probably like it." And I was, yeah, I will probably like it because I like your previous games. And they were like, except, we kind of forgot about the press release. And I was like, again, back then, so it was like 2013 press releases were, I think, a bit maybe more important than they are these days
Yeah.
because traditional press is less important. Anyway, so I was like, so you forget like to send it? And they were like, and now we forget that it needs to exist. And I was like, okay, cool. So you made the game and decided not to tell anyone. And they were like, can you write us a press release? And basically that's how I started working at Icepeak Lodge. So I was never intending to have a career in gaming. I just happened upon Icepeak Lodge because before then I was like, I made comics, I wrote books, I worked as an editor for a cinema business website. So basically, I was doing kind of adjacent, geek stuff, but not necessarily gaming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's interesting, though. It seems to be the story, particularly in the indie game scene, that people do just kind of by accident end up falling into it. So you're actually, your handle of the English language, I think, is absolutely amazing. Without wanting to like patronize anyone, because it's like easy for me, but I'm always impressed because English people are terrible at learning other languages. So I'm always amazed that people have such a good grasp of the language, or any other language, to be honest. And you have had quite a lot of praise over the years for your ability as a translator and a localization lead. So I am curious about your relationship with the English language in particular, and how you kind of made that connection as someone able to translate it, and the influence it's had on your life up to this point. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Again, as with many people of my generation, I obviously studied English at school because, like, we have English in the Russian school curriculum from the first grade, and I am a linguist by education, so I again studied English at the university. But my grasp of the English language actually comes from culture. I just so happened to fall in love with Pink Floyd when I was 10, and like being kind of obsessed as children slash teenagers sometimes are. I translated all their songs into Russian in rhyme, so that you could sing. The translations were terrible, well, most of them, because I was very young, but it kind of forced me to learn a lot about the English language, because a lot of Roger Waters' poetry is very colloquial, so like he uses British slang, he just has his own quirks in the way he writes poems, and that kind of forced me to understand stuff. I was also a fan of Jesus Christ Superstar, and because like music is very good at this, because you just learn a song by heart, and I don't know, you walk around singing it, you don't necessarily understand every line, but you remember it. So you have all these texts stored in your memory. It's like, like you're a language model, and you have a bunch of, in linguistics, it's called a corpus of texts in your brain. So you don't necessarily, just like AI, like a language model, you don't even need to necessarily fully understand a phrase to just repeat it if you know the context where it was used.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, so in linguistics, there are two ways to learn a language. Language learning, which is the thing you do at school where you learn the rules, you do exercises and stuff like that. And language acquisition, which is when you are just immersed into a language, and you kind of begin repeating the phrases without fully understanding, and then slowly you absorb the meanings. So I feel that for a person who has well, I only went to a country where people speak English at a very late age. So I was never truly immersed in the language, but I was deeply immersed in the English language culture. So I had a lot of language acquisition, even being in Russia. And hopefully this is what gave me a good understanding of English and good grasp of English.
Well, it's
Even though my I believe Russian-born friend from Dublin yesterday found my messages on one like gaming Discord, and like he lives in Dublin, but he wrote to me, "Would it be fine if I correct your English?" And I was like, "Sure." And yeah, his corrections were actually spot on. So like, it's not like I was making mistakes, but it was kind of like awkward phrasing, you know.
yeah,
So
that's often the case with
thank you, buddy.
translation. That is often the case with translations, isn't there? There's always like tiny little quirks and orders and things that wouldn't quite go exactly as that. But no, it's
Well,
fascinating.
by the decree of the good translators committee, I'm not actually allowed to translate into English, because you are generally speaking allowed only translate into your native language. Because no matter how well you know, no matter how fluent you are, a different language, you will still like miss points. But I break this rule, which is maybe not necessarily a very good thing, but I still do.
Well, you haven't offended this one English person with any translation yet, so you must be on the right track, Alphyna. I reckon you're doing okay. I just want to, so I don't want to go into too much detail here because I do have some follow up questions. I'm curious. So, Pathologic in particular is well known for its relationship with theatre. It's obviously presented as a kind of theatre show. In particular, in the first game, you literally have that exposition at the start, right? I'm just
Mhm.
curious about you personally and your relationship with theatre. Are you also what we would call a thespian in the UK? Do you have a long-standing relationship with theatre?
I don't know what it is one needs to have to qualify as a thespian. Like I went to a child's theater group when I was 9. Does it
Mhm.
qualify? But I do visit theater like, I don't know, twice or thrice every month.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of stay in touch with the modern theater that is available to me, obviously locally. Uh, uh, so I try to keep up. Let's put it this way. Also, Russian culture and Russian literature has a unique connection to theater and film.
Mm. Yeah.
On that note, like, so in the early 20th century, you would have Eisenstein, who basically, like, okay, maybe you can't say about any single person that he invented modern cinema, but he invented modern cinema. And then you would have a number of different schools of theatrical performance, because you would have Stanislavski, who, in simple terms, was all about like living the role and realism. So the actor would be about uh, like um, basically his approach would be that the actor needs to feel every emotion that he is performing, and that they need to be realistic, which made the performances kind of muted in an interesting way. And Chekhov was writing at the time, and the interesting thing is that his plays are so again, have you read Chekhov?
No, but I
Just
know about
curious.
Chekhov's gun. Is it the same Chekhov?
Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the guy. So
Yeah.
he was a Russian writer and playwright, and
Mhm.
the cool thing about him is that he kind of reinvented theater in that he started writing plays about very boring life.
Mm.
So like Russian rural life where nothing really happens and everything is very muted, and people have very complicated relationships that don't necessarily translate obviously well to a theatrical scene, because his plays are much closer to something you would expect from a modern movie, because in a movie, the camera can capture a person's face closely, so like every small detail and nuance of their acting
Yep.
translates well to the screen. But that's not how theater works, because as a viewer, you like watch the scene from afar, so actors have like exaggerated paint on their faces, and their acting is exaggerated compared to real life. So Chekhov's plays were weird in that they did not lean into that. And a whole theatrical school arose in Russia in the early 20th century that was all about this sort of muted acting as alternative to the more grandiose other schools of acting. And I feel that this whole conversation about like basically how to perform in theater that was very prominent in the Russian avant-garde in the early 20th century is something that not only is just cool to learn about, but also something that informed the Russian culture of the 20th century in very important ways. So even the people who aren't thespians and who aren't like I don't know, going to theater, if they read Russian literature of the 20th century, and like not necessarily even the most modern, they are still informed by this conversation, and it kind of so its roots are deep in Russian culture. So I feel that any game that, as Pathologic is informed by Russian culture, kind of can't avoid it. Obviously, like we wear our inspirations on the sleeve.
Yep.
But what I'm saying here is that I think this connection is actually deeper, and it may be present in some other works of art in less obvious ways, and also that we couldn't avoid it really.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And by the way, talking about learning about theatre, I'm learning a lot, and I had to learn a lot because I enjoy theatre, right? But it's a very different cultural thing here in the UK, right? We have obviously the West End, but I mean, you don't get anything quite as serious. It's very kind of I'd say child friendly, really. You don't get any of the more serious stuff, really, at least not to my knowledge. So I did, have to learn quite a
That's
bit
kind
about
of a shame.
theatre. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some British people will tell me that I'm completely wrong and I'm just not looking in the right places. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this whole idea, as you were talking about the idea of Chekhov kind of having these plays or these stories about kind of nothing. I was going to say he beat Seinfeld to it, right? Because Seinfeld was obviously like the first sitcom that was kind of about nothing really happening.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. Everyone always credits Jerry Seinfeld for being a pioneer there, but he was beaten to it by 20th century Russian playwright. So they're very good. And it's nice actually to hear that it runs deeper than just kind of being a theatre goer or a thespian, and because I am fascinated, so particularly about theatre's influence on Russian culture, because I play a lot of Civ, and I know that you get to build the Bolshoi theatre, of course. So I have all of these funny loose connections to history, which mostly come from playing a lot of Civ. So I do understand to a degree that there's history in there, and of course, theatre is really apart from maybe painting on walls with bits of mud, one of the earliest cultural things that we did as human beings. Obviously, it goes as far back as Greece, the amphitheatres and all of that. So, hugely important cultural influence on just the human race in general, right?
I also think that now that you mention ancient Greece, theater obviously was a performance for the public there, but there also existed the term is mysterious, like mystery. I'm not sure how you pronounce it in English, but basically these sort of theatrical performances that did not exist to please the public, but instead to please the gods, and were this sort of mixture of acting and praying, and orgies sometimes were also there
The Greeks love
because
that, yeah, yeah,
yeah, because like they knew how to have fun.
yeah, yeah.
uh, and the idea here I'm mentioning that because if you think about it, it's kind of close to a video game, because you would participate in a certain act in a situation where you would play a role, like you would don a mask, you would pretend to be, I don't know, a faun, if you were praising Dionysus, for example, or whatever. But you would then take on this role and play out the role of a faun and hopefully hook up with a cute nymph. But
Yeah.
it's this mixture of perceiving a story, telling a story, and performing that's in a way similar to video games, because in video games we do exactly the same. We are presented with circumstances, we put on a mask, become a faun, and try to hook up with a nymph,
Yeah. Well, that's basically you've described every BioWare RPG but the entirety of Baldur's Gate, obviously. I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit here. So, I mean, I had a question on how you came into Ice Pick Lodge, which you've obviously already explained. And I am just going to jump ahead because we're talking about it. I was looking into some of the theatre influences of Pathologic and Ice Pick Lodge, etc., and I saw Brechtian theatre, if I pronounce that right, described. And when I was reading about it on the Wikipedia, it obviously, so for people who don't know, Brechtian theatre is basically the art of theatre where the audience are invited to be part of the story and part of the proceedings, and there's that participation element. And when I was thinking about asking you on how that influenced, as you rightly point out, it's actually really obvious, because Brechtian theatre is the art of role-playing a game, pretty much. You could completely, draw a comparison, because a creator of a game or a writer of a game, that's exactly what they're doing. They're inviting you in to participate in the story that they've created and play your role in that. So, yeah, I guess, does that ever kind of enter your psyche or the team's kind of philosophy when you're thinking about creating a game? Does that become part of the makeup of a game like Pathologic for you?
Oh, absolutely. And again, like I said, I honestly think that it enters the minds of many video game creators. It's just that they don't necessarily always have the cultural equipment to realize that this is what they're doing, which is again fine. They don't have to. And like I said, we are kind of you could even say on the nose with wearing our influences on the sleeve. But what I'm saying here is that everyone is influenced by the history of theater. Some people just don't realize that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am at the point now where I'm going to start asking you about Pathologic. So I need to make it very clear what my position is in the world of Pathologic. So everybody knows that I'm probably like somewhere near the end of my Disco Elysium journey. I mean, if there is such a thing for an obsessive like myself, it probably never ends really. But I've lived and breathed Disco Elysium for a number of years now. And what I don't want Pathologic fans to come into here is thinking that I'm like an expert on Pathologic, because I'm not. So, cards on the table. A few friends, well, I'll name him actually, Giacomo Montagnali, who is heading up a studio making a game called Glasshouse. A little shout out for Giacomo there.
I know about it, yeah.
Yeah. He is a huge Pathologic fan, and he had basically insisted that I play it at least once a week. I think he was telling me to play Pathologic, and he said to play Pathologic 2. So I played Pathologic 2, I don't know, about a month or so ago. And my experience was like a lot of people's, I think. I went through 2 runs where I was at the point of asking Giacomo, what the fuck have you done to me? What is your problem? I thought we were friends. Why are you doing this? And I really struggled with it, to be honest. I think that's a really, really actually wonderful part of Pathologic. And to its credit, despite how grueling and horrible and painful it was, that process of learning, and it's a big, especially Pathologic 2, right? Because it's kind of assumed, as the Harrispecs, as someone who used to live in the town, you kind of know these things and people talk to you like you know these things, right? So there's a big learning curve. But I was so fascinated by the world and the story and what was going on that I did eventually put the sliders down, because I was like, I have to know what this story is about. So anyway, that's a bit of a monologue from me, just to kind of paint the picture of where I am. So if I don't ask like a deep, meaningful question, Pathologic fans, that's why. And if I ask a question that's really obvious that you're all like, God, he doesn't even know that, then I apologise up front. So anyway, enough from me. I just want to ask first of all. So Pathologic 2. I did a little bit of research. I understand it was originally going to be a remake of the first game, and the intention was to have, as it was with the first game, all three perspectives, right? And it ended up being a much wider, expanded version of the Harrispec story. So, can you just tell me about a little bit about the process and how it kind of evolved from that original idea, and how you settled on a full-fledged Harrispec
Yeah,
expansion?
absolutely. So, Pathologic, excuse me. Yeah. So Pathologic, the original Pathologic, is very much a cult classic in Russia, and it's the first game that the studio has made. It has a cult following, but what's more important is that it's like it is what defined the identity of the studio. So it's extremely dear and important to the people at the studio. So at some point, we have decided that the game is old, it's janky, it has a lot of errors, were made during its production. So hey, why not make a better version of the game that everybody loves, that we love, and where a lot of ideas were not necessarily implemented in the way they were envisioned. Because again, that was the debut game of the studio, so obviously a new studio will make mistakes in production. That's the thought that went into making the remake. And then, so the term feature creep. Do you know what
Yeah,
it is?
no, go on.
In development, for example, in game development, it's a situation where you envision a product, for example, a game, and then you keep on piling more and more ideas and features into it, so it becomes kind of bloated.
Okay.
Well, we sort of had this thing, but not necessarily even with features, but with ideas, because it turned out immediately that the artists weren't happy with their art choices, and the writers weren't happy with their writing choices, and the overall approach to design was imperfect. So the scope of changes bloated immediately, because since we have we have kickstarted, we had a Kickstarter campaign, and everyone was kind of hyped to make this perfect vision of this particular game. And when you are hyped to make a perfect vision of a game, you don't settle for half measures, do you? So we basically started through making everything from scratch, and by that I mean the world stayed the same, the main bits of the story stayed the same, but the approach to design, the specific character arcs, a lot of ways the story unfolds and is told were different. So, and the simple answer is we started working with the Haraspix. That was my personal idea, because the Bachelor story was better implemented in the original game. It was written first, it had more detail, he had more screen time. So my logic was like, hey, let's start with the underdog. Let's start with the character who was a bit underdeveloped, which is what we did. And then we kind of realized that we won't make the three stories. We just don't have the production capabilities, so we just released one story. And then after a while we realized that just making another script, like another story in the same engine, but I don't mean engine technically, but in the same game design space, would do a disservice to The Bachelor, because you see how it kind of all ties together, not necessarily, honestly, from a managerial standpoint, not necessarily always in a very healthy way, but since we've already released the Haraspix, we will have to make the Bachelor story and then the Changeling story separate games. Since we're making them separate games, we don't have to make them similar to the Haraspix. We can instead use this opportunity to tell the Bachelor story through different gameplay and not just different dialogue, and character models. And it's like with Paper Please that I talked about before. Gameplay is extremely important. It's not just something to fill your time in between dialogues. Gameplay is what tells the story as well. So obviously, if we are leaning heavily into this idea that we have one town, 3 healers, and each of them has their very subjective perspective and their subjective worldview, and their story is about something else. So like they live through similar events, but the meaning of these events is very different for the 3 of them. It makes sense that the game design will be different as well, and that's how we end up with Pathologic 3, which is the bachelor story, but it has different mechanics. So it won't be this harsh survival of the her aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. I, for one, as someone who's new to Pathologic, am so glad that it's turned out that way, because I was kind of warned off Pathologic 1 because obviously I'd like Pathologic 2 existed obviously at this point. Yeah, they kind of said that there's a lot of jank. It's kind of hard to get into. I'm way more up for going back to playing it now that I've played Pathologic 2, because I'm kind of in, and I kind of get that, you know, there's and I'm not too bad with older games. I kind of accept that it's just one of those things, and I'm from the right generation as well, so I get that games weren't always as you know, slick as all the Sony AAA stuff, right? So I'm really excited about the prospect of having like a fully fledged bachelor story in Pathologic 3, and then I hope, of course, that you go on as planned to do a Pathologic 4 with the Changeling, because obviously playing Pathologic 2, there was a lot of it's a strange thing to experience that world for the first time, because you obviously meet the Bachelor and you meet the Changeling, and I was like, who are these people? And there's a lot of meta stuff that I was just kind of like, it takes a lot of getting your head around. So I'm really excited about the prospect of being able to see those different perspectives. So I'm really glad that you're doing it that way. And I thoroughly enjoyed the Harrispeck story, by the way. I thought it was fantastic. I just want to mention, we did talk a little bit about suffering, and just kind of linking it with theatre again. There was something called Theatre of Cruelty by Antonin Artaud, or I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm useless with names. And so my experience, as you mentioned there, Pathologic 3 isn't quite the grueling suffering endurance that you might find with Pathologic 2. But I do wonder, so it's now become such a part of the DNA of Ice Pick Lodge and what a lot of people expect. So I just wonder, from your point of view, during certainly the development of Pathologic 2, how important was it for you making that game to have that suffering and that level of conflict? Because I'll also go back to, have you ever seen H. Bomber Guy's essay on Pathologic?
Yes, of course.
I loved what he said about Pathologic's kind of tutorial bit at the start, where the game teaches you the value of making good or bad decisions. So you can go out and speak to the 2 guys, the Worm and the Chapman. If you decide to threaten them, you basically get killed, and you've got no chance, because obviously the combat's very difficult and all the rest of it. So yeah, I just wonder, how important is it to you to maintain a level of suffering in your games, and do you think you see a world where you don't have as much of that going on for future games?
It's an incredibly complicated question, and I don't feel that I have the right answer to it, not yet anyway, because from both the artistic and the psychological standpoint, I do believe that a certain level of suffering is crucial for basically anything meaningful. And by that, I mean, that probably like is a bad soundbite, but what I mean is that the best, I don't know, works of art, movies, games, whatever, is something that leaves you wanting a bit in some way. It either, I don't know, it denies you pleasure at some point and you have to overcome a challenge, or I don't know, like, the movies I remember best are the ones that genuinely confused me with their choices. So the ones that, I don't know, like, I don't know, The Substance, for example. I'm not even sure it's a good movie, honestly. It's weird. And have you watched it?
I haven't, but
Okay.
as soon as you said that, the movie that sprung to mind was actually Requiem for a Dream. I don't know if you've seen that. Darren Aronofsky?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Another movie that confused, so like, just because it's the most modern example, you probably know what the substance is about.
I do.
It's
Yeah,
about...
you can spoil it.
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
I'm
so
spoil it.
it's about an aging model who struggles coming to terms with her age. So she tries this invented substance that creates her young clone, and then they kind of fight over who their life belongs to. So they kind of like struggle to figure out how to live. But then, like the metaphor is obvious, the problems that the movie tackles are obvious. But then in the last fifth, the movie devolves into this incredibly weird rubberhead alien horror where the woman becomes an abomination, and then she like grabs a chainsaw, and I'm not kidding, and she goes to, like, in an attempt, to present herself to the audience, she goes to them and someone murders her, and like there are tons of blood, and it looks like not even a B movie, like a D movie, a D horror flick. And it's very weird because like the first, let's say, 4/5 of the movie are very artistic, very muted. They have very interesting presentation, and I was completely baffled by the choice of the ending, not the story, but the stylistic choice of the ending. It's like the movie switches genres, and I'm not even sure if that's because the directress kind of failed at what she wanted to say and make, or
Yeah.
if that was a deliberate choice. I don't know, but I'm baffled, and I will remember this movie for years to come.
Yeah.
This is more, I suppose this is probably an example of how jank can be meaningful. So it's like, I kind of suspect that this is not an impression she was trying to make, but this is the impression that she made, and that made the movie interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because if it was just one more Lynchian psychological horror about, like, the struggles of being an older woman and whatnot and finding your identity, it would be more forgettable. So that's the interesting part. What I'm saying here is that the movie kind of rejected good taste, and with that, it became more interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is also, on a different note, kind of like there is this saying that you should leave the table when you're still a bit hungry, and that you should, when you're
It's
invited
better
somewhere.
to. Yeah. It's better to leave wanting more than to leave having had enough.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like when you're a guest at someone's house, you should leave when people would still miss you, and not when
Yes.
they actually want you to leave.
Yeah.
So I feel that, and both are examples of denying a pleasure to yourself when you want it. So you still want to eat, but you deny it to yourself because you know it's better for you in the long run. You still want to socialize with your friends, but you deny it to yourself because you know it's better for the both of you to stay a bit wanting.
Yeah.
I feel that this is exactly how it works with video games as well, with any piece of art. It should deny something to the person, because that creates that feeling of wanting, and that is meaningful. But, and that's a very huge but, we live in an extremely oversaturated landscape. Like, I have bought, I think, like 5 games in the last 2 weeks that
Yeah.
I'm all interested in, genuinely interested in, and I can't even find the time to launch them.
Yeah.
And all my artistic, like this thoughts about how you need to deny something to the player so that the experience becomes meaningful, kind of stepped upon by the thought that, and they'll just buy the game that is pleasurable for them.
Yeah.
So like, you need to convince people that they need to experience this more complicated thing, and it's not easy to do. And that's not a critique of people, because it makes sense that people want to have fun. But I genuinely am unsure currently in the landscape we're in, where like 10 games are released daily on Steam. And again, I am a kind of a picky gamer. I don't play AAA games, for example. So like, I have genres that I personally enjoy and types of games that I personally enjoy. And even with all that, I have like 2 new games a week that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
How in the world am I supposed to convince people to try something unusual and not necessarily immediately pleasurable in this landscape? As as an artist, I do kind of want people to suffer, in that I want them to be denied something to receive a meaningful experience, because when they finally obtain it, or when they experience this denial, it will be more interesting and more important to them than just, I don't know, playing another RPG when you can level up, get good gear, and this hit of dopamine, you know?
Yep.
But as a, let's say, marketologist, like as a talking head person, as someone who also needs to sell games to survive, I have no idea how to convince people to do that, because, like, why would they?
Yeah. Then I suppose it's in Pathologic's case, it's an interesting one because it's kind of become a meme at this point that most people don't like even get past the first achievement on Steam for the first game, and in Pathologic 2, similar experiences. A lot of people kind of bounce off it because they just can't kind of get past certain elements of it, and it must be very difficult for you, as you so eloquently put, because a lot of the audience coming for Pathologic want that and expect it, but then as you've rightly said, as someone whose job it is in a saturated environment to sell a game, you can't really afford to have too many risks of people disliking it, especially now that you can refund stuff if you don't like it, right? Like if you're 24 hours later, it's not for you, you refund it or something like that. So no, it's interesting. I welcome, for me personally, I think I have enough of appreciation for the writing. That's the most important thing to me in Pathologic, and that's why I pursued so much with Pathologic 2, is because it's really well written and it's intriguing and it's fascinating. And I honestly think as long as you have that, and my experience of the demo of Quarantine suggests that I won't be wanting. Which tells me that a lot of other fans won't be found wanting, and I think you'll still have something interesting. So if I could offer any words of encouragement, I would say you're still being brave enough, I think, and interesting enough that people will be interested. And I am fascinated by what's going to happen with the Bachelor story. So...
Just something I would like to add is that
Yep.
we are, with The Bachelor, we are actually trying to, the way I put it, restructure the stress on the player. So basically, you don't have hunger and thirst and the challenges of harasspics anymore. You don't have to juggle bread loaves, which was stressful for a reason.
Yep.
But there are many reasons for that. One of them being that we've already done that. So, and this type of survival games have become kind of popular recently. They stopped being popular very recently, but like basically there are a lot of survival games on the market these days. So we don't feel that this is like interesting and challenging enough to make just one more survival game.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing. And the other is that we want to try to provide different challenges for the player. So to the people who kind of struggle, because like, okay, one more thing that I would like to say, a bit abstract. Sorry about digressing.
No, it's okay. You digress as much as you want, Alphyna.
What's the most, let me say, art house movie that you like?
Probably Black Swan.
Okay, it's a good one. I like it as well. Art house and like, you know, this.
Is that art house enough? I think it qualifies as art house.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. So culture exists for many reasons. Providing an experience is only one of them. But one more reason that culture exists is to share, like, to map yourself through the cultural influences that you like. So, you know, like on, I don't know, like dating profiles, people write their favorite movies, and you can tell something about the person from the movies that they like. So like if he unironically likes American Psycho, then you're like, have you read the book?
Yeah.
And another reason that culture exists is to create this sort of structure for social status. So sometimes people, I won't say pretend to enjoy highbrow culture to look cool, but kind of like they watch a bunch of art house movies to say that they're cultured, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the experience of watching was the most important element. Maybe it was the joining the club of people who have watched the film and can discuss it now.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit different, because it's one thing to actually be impressed by a movie, and it's another thing to have watched it and now be able to join the cultural discussion around it. So again, when you are considering creating this sort of challenging experiences, the actual experience is only one facet of it. And I experience a lot of different culture, but there are evenings where I don't have the energy to watch an Ingmar Bergman movie.
Yeah.
There are evenings where I'll watch another episode of Community and have fun with it, and that's what I'll do. So you can't expect the audience to always have the energy and desire to delve into a complicated experience. And again, this is all, I just wanted to babble a bit more about it, because I think it's a very complicated problem. You want someone, even myself, I want to have fulfilling and meaningful experiences, but sometimes I don't have the energy. So I opt in for something simpler, for something that's just fun, for another, I don't know, round of Diablo. And the question is, would my life be better if someone forced me to play a more unusual and complicated game? So should I force myself to always go for complicated experience, or is it okay to sometimes just have fun? And again, it's obviously okay to sometimes just have fun. I'm definitely not trying to, I don't know, shame anyone but myself. But I ask this question myself when I find that I'm playing Balatro again. An incredible game. Really love it. Great game design. It's not a meaningful experience in the same way that Planescape Torment was for me. Should I force myself to close Balatro and try a new game that I haven't played, like Glasshouse, you know?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably should, but I don't always do that. So obviously I can't expect that from the audience, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all human beings. And again, this just unfortunately brings me to that I don't have a definite answer on how complicated an experience you should make, and how you should convince people to try it, and if you should actively convince people to try it.
Yeah. No, again, you've got a really fascinating worldview, actually, and it's interesting that you remark on the fact that, in particular, I like what you said about the desire or the need to be part of the cultural conversation, because I did feel that a little bit of Pathologic too. Like, the more and more people talk to me about it, and I think it's the same with Disco Elysium, you see a lot of people come into it, and the subreddit's full of people like, what am I supposed to be doing? What's going on? Because they've come into this experience.
Is this politics here?
Yeah, exactly. Like, why?
I don't know. I sorry, I just follow this subreddit, and have you seen that meme with the "Is this politics"?
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, and we get that a lot. And Pathologic too, I did feel like there was two things pulling me through that game. One, of course, was the writing. I really did enjoy what was going on with those conversations and trying to find out what was happening and why these relationships were important. But there's also a part of me that was really driven to be part of that conversation and be able to talk about Pathologic with people and have the actual credentials of finishing the game. What I didn't want to do is kind of half finish it and go, oh yeah, my experience of it was okay, I finished half a game, because then I don't feel like I have a right to kind of talk to it. So it's interesting, yeah, that you point that out, because I've definitely felt that myself. And equally, I am just as happy to sink 4 or 5 hours into something like Hearthstone, which is just repetitive numbers flashing and instant gratification, just as much as I'm likely to play something deep and meaningful. All depends on mood, right? All depends on your mood. Okay, so I want to ask a couple of questions about Pathologic 2 in particular. The moral conflict stuff, it's so funny to me that I realised how fickle I am with my moral compass when I was playing Pathologic, right? There's a lot of situations where you're kind of forced by circumstance into making decisions that maybe you would not otherwise have made. So for some reason, like I never once liked the Inquisitor. In all of the times I was talking to that lady, I was really fascinated by the fact that there's a lot of fourth wall breaking, right? And then so she can read everyone's thoughts or she can understand what everyone's thinking, but she couldn't crack you. But she's talking to you, as in me, the player. And once I'd realised that, and then all of a sudden, like, there's this, she's falling in love with me as a result. And somehow I went from thinking she was the most evil force that could have turned up in the game, and like without even batting an eyelid, I was running away with her to the train station to escape the town and just like leave everyone behind. I was like, what the fuck has happened to me here? So I'm just like, with everything you said in mind, is it still quite important to you to have? Okay, we might not have the conflict of like survival mechanics and stuff like that, but morally ambiguous situations which kind of bring circumstance to force players into situations where they have to make decisions which really do have them questioning their own moral compass. Is that still something that's quite important to you for games moving forward?
Absolutely. Creating interesting situations is like what Pathologic is all about, because on the one hand you have the plague, which is an extreme circumstance, and extreme circumstances obviously breed, extreme reactions. So like, again, I'm kind of philosophizing here again, but like, why even experience culture? We do that because this is our opportunity to experience something, or at least like a similar of something that we won't experience in real life. If you like read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, you delve into the head of a murderer, and hopefully you won't ever murder anyone in real life. However, you kind of get a version of this experience. And again, kind of philosophizing here, but I genuinely think that this is probably the greatest aspect of humanity. The fact that actually, I think it was very poignantly touched upon by Disco Elysium. All creatures of this earth experience their lives, and humans experience their lives and an incredible number of virtual lives. So we can share experiences with each other. We can understand how another person lives. We can understand how an imaginary person lives. And like, cats don't get to do that, and phasmids don't get to do that. Only humans do.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. And this is a very important asset. So obviously, we use this opportunity in Pathologic to create extreme circumstances, to explore these situations. But then there is another layer. Like, there are a number of pieces of art and like great games. I don't know, This War of Mine, for example, is a great game that explores the morality of actions in extreme circumstances via story and gameplay. It's a very good game. I really love it.
I love that game as well, actually. We finally got a game that we both played, by the way. Well, apart from obviously Pathologic and Disco Elysium, but yeah, I love This War of Mine.
We were inspired by it to some extent, of course.
Yeah.
But also, the world and story of Pathologic is weirder than the world and story of This War of Mine. And to me, this is an opportunity to also explore some of the more strange and esoteric concept. Like, This War of Mine deals with and again, it's great at it, with the sad and gritty reality of war, of death, of survival, and how it changes people. In Pathologic, you have people actually dealing with like talking bulls and immortality.
Yeah.
And but the thing to me is that you can explore these things in full seriousness, juxtaposing them against normal human tragedies of like someone losing their loved one to the plague, very simple stuff. And that's what makes them interesting. So of course we went, as you may have heard from the marketing materials, Pathologic 3 will feature time travel.
Yep.
And like quote unquote time travel. basically, it's a story that's told by the Bachelor in a non-linear fashion, and we kind of wanted to dive into the fantasy of, you know, how if you have an argument with someone and then you come up with a comeback 3 days later,
Yeah.
and you think, if only I could go back in time and tell him, like, or I don't know, if you make a mistake, and if only I could not sell Bitcoin in 2016, you know. Uh, so we
Yeah.
kind of wanted to make a game that's a fantasy based on that.
Yeah.
But then obviously, it's not a twist. You'll come to realize that some of your choices that seemed like they made sense at the start actually don't necessarily lead to good consequences, and maybe you need to go back in time again and change them again and stuff like that. And this structure allows us to explore um, unforeseen consequences and complicated situations that so like again, personally, I'm all for disempowering a player, and like if you play a video game and you make a choice and then you realize that choice led to negative consequences unexpectedly or something like that, I think this experience is meaningful. But some players would say it's unfair because they couldn't have predicted that their favorite character would die because they did something and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we don't have to bother with wondering if that's okay to do if the game allows the player to go back in time and change the outcomes. So it all becomes this kind of fantasy of exploring complicated situations. So that was a very long answer to the question of, like, Pathologic 3, I think, is the best suited game of the series for exploring complicated situations, is what I'm saying.
Interesting. Do not apologise ever for all of your long answers, because I could listen to you say them all day, and I'm sure the audience will love it as well. So I am going to talk. So I did have some questions on the time travel stuff, but there is a mechanic in Pathologic 2 which really fascinated me, actually, and that is the save game mechanic. So for those that don't know, and I'd be amazed if anyone listening didn't know this, you can't save scum in Pathologic 2. If you die, it's locked in and it remembers, and you your circumstances, which, by the way, I never actually knew what was made harder, which was another cruel joke from you guys. I was like, what have you made harder? I did die enough times that I was offered the option of making it really easy, which I refused. But I'm really curious about, as a team of developers, how you came up with it, why you came up with it, how you implemented it, and why you hate me so much.
Okay, so one thing that I feel is like one experience that I think is extremely interesting is not knowing the outcome. I feel that, again, I've already touched upon this. When I play a video game, so you probably haven't played it, but there is this game, and I'll just use it as an example. It's called The Life and Suffering of Sir Brante,
Haven't played it, no.
made by Russian-speaking developers, and it's more like, it's kind of like a text-based visual novel about person. It doesn't matter what it's about. What matters is that it's basically like a choice and consequence book, and you get a lot of story choices. And there are two modes that you can play this game. You can either turn on the notifications that show which stats each of your choice will change. So, like, basically, like, I don't know, if I do this, I'll get +5 respect from that character.
Yeah.
Or turn them off. And these are two completely different experiences. Playing the game while knowing, like the mechanical meaning behind, like the gears moving behind the story, and just making these choices based on vibes and like your idea of morality and whatever, and just living with the outcome. That game is balanced in such a way that if you try the latter, you'll probably end with a bad ending. So it kind of requires optimization. I think that, like, just that people want these two different experiences in different situations. Sometimes you do want to play a game where you know what each of your choices will make. Like, sometimes you want to play Slay the Spire, where each card deals this specific amount of damage. You know that it will deal this much damage. You know that your enemy is about to strike you for this amount of damage, and it's now your goal to solve the situation. It might be the same with stories. You know that if you do that, you can romance that guy, and if you do this, you'll become an enemy to that faction. So, hey, make a choice. Do you want to be a friend or the enemy to that faction? You know,
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. But this sense of not knowing the outcome, I think, is extremely tingly. It's fun, and it's something that we have way too much of in real life. Except in real life, you can get cancer or go to jail or like break up with someone, basically have actual negative consequences of some actions. And in video games, you are safe. So again, since it's all a game, it doesn't affect your real life. You are safe to explore this anxiety of not knowing what will happen. This is basically my big answer to the question about the fellow traveler, because I do enjoy this. To those of you who might not know, in Pathologic 2, each time you die, you get a minus, so like a negative bonus, to something. And the game becomes progressively harder. But at some point, a character, like a meta character, comes up to you and says, "Hey, I can turn this all off. But you will pay me with something, like like in the stories, give me something from your home that you don't know
Yes.
exists." It's this sort of trick. And if you do agree, these minuses are removed from the game. But spoiler alert, you lose the game's ending. Literally, you just, instead of an ending, you get a conversation with this guy saying, "Well, dear player, you chose not to interact with the game, so don't interact with the game. You don't get to see the ending." And like a jerk move, but a fun move, because I feel that the anxiety of not knowing what the deal was, like, so you make the deal with a fellow traveler, and then you keep playing the game, and everything is fine, and you like. It seems like there are no negative consequences. I feel that this anxiety of not knowing is a very interesting emotion that games don't explore enough. And, of course, we'll have something to that extent in Pathologic 3 as well. I won't spoil what it is. I'll just say that, yes, we have shenanigans with save files, and yes, we have shenanigans with unforeseen consequences, and yes, we have shenanigans with unforeseen consequences that cannot be overwritten with your save files.
Sneaky. I like it though.
I'm sorry, I won't spoil them.
Yeah,
Just saying that this is a thing that we like to explore.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. And just so someone kept, everyone kept asking me, including Argo Tulik, actually, if I agreed to play dice at the start with the fellow traveller. And I was like, funnily enough, because I'd already done 2 runs, my third final, like, complete run, I skipped through that dialogue and I had no idea whether I'd agreed to play dice or not. As it turns out, I got the nocturnal ended, so I'm guessing I made the right choice at that point. So is it the same? So tell me and tell everyone, if I'd agreed to play dice, what was the outcome? Is that the outcome we're talking about? Like, you don't get an ending?
The decision to play dice in the prologue influences literally nothing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's just smoke and mirrors. That is actually a bit of Ice Pick Lodge's philosophy that I personally don't always agree with, but part of the team were always very fascinated with the idea of smoke and mirrors in video games. So you know how there is a myth that, like, you can uncensor the slur in Disco Elysium if you choose the homosexual underground thought.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't exist.
No.
It's not a thing, and people keep repeating that because that would be fun. Like, it would be funny if that was true,
Yeah.
And there are a lot of myths about other games, and there are myths about Pathologic that exist, and people repeat them because they make them for funny, like, they're fun. They make great fun narratives. Actually, with some, it was a deliberate decision with some things in Pathologic 2, and I won't tell you which ones, because as far as I remember, the team was inspired by how in Hellblade, Infection did literally nothing. It was only there to scare you. So each time you failed, as far as I remember, your character would get more and more infected. And it just it was cosmetics. It didn't mean anything. But people lived in fear of failure because of that cosmetics. So the team was like, hey, you can literally do nothing and people will still be scared. And again, that's an interesting thing to play with. It's an interesting experience to locate those smoke and mirrors in ways that would force people to think something is happening when it's not. But like I said, I personally, like me, Alphyna, as a single person, I feel that it can be done in interesting ways. It's something that's fun to experiment with, but I would not get carried away too much with stuff like that, because at some point it can become pointless.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you for that. I have one more question. I was just around Pathologic. I got some more on Pathologic 3, and I've got some fan questions which I'm eager to get through because the fans probably are looking forward to this quite a bit. So I got sent a picture, and I very nearly destroyed the whole town to save the polyhedron, but the forget the name now. The cow and the worms and all of the people turned up at my door and said, "No, don't do it." So again, I was so back and forth with my moral choices; it was crazy. But then I was sent a picture, so I understood the polyhedron to be a wound, but actually, someone showed me an image of it being a womb and something where it was connected to rebirth. So please just put my mind at rest. What is the polyhedron?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Ah.
Well, the thing is, I'd say that the lore and the fantasy and the world building around it is very clearly defined internally, but the whole idea of Pathologic is that each of the characters views the world in a subjective way. So each of them has their own interpretation of what are stuff. The simplest example would be that the kin genuinely do believe that the world is like a giant sleeping bull.
Mm-hmm.
And since the Haraspix is a person of mixed origins, he doesn't literally believe that it's a giant sleeping bull, but he does believe that the Earth is alive in some way.
Yeah.
And he can communicate with it. And it's obviously up to the player to decide, is he hallucinating? Is this true? We create fiction that works on several levels, and it would be a disservice to this fiction to just say that the polyhedron is this or that.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a realistic, on one layer, it's just a construction. It's an architectural edifice that spoilers, pierces the ground, and since there is old blood in the ground that was poured there by generations of butchers, it got infected, and the polyhedron piercing the ground released this infected blood that started the plague.
Yeah.
On a different level, it's a symbol of hubris, because the whole idea behind the polyhedron is we'll literally create a building that cannot stand physically. And somehow the architects behind it managed to defy the law of gravity.
Yep.
And because of that, the plague happened as, let's say, divine punishment for that, because it's like this if I use more modern language, this sort of paradox that happens. So the world reacted to people breaking its laws with the worst plague imaginable, just trying to erase this town because it is an affront to reality.
Yeah.
On a different level, it's just industrialization hurting the natural order of things. So they used to have this town that stood on an abattoir that used to be a temple where people would worship bulls, then slaughter bulls, because it's a very normal traditional practice to worship the animals that you eat, but you do it in the right way.
Yeah.
And there was this order of thing, and then these modernists, industrialists arrived from the capital and began creating factories, and what's even worse, began creating art and try to make a statement here. And that is something that destroys the natural balance of things. So again, it's like a wound that gets festered. And then it's also a castle for the children who literally can live up there, and it's basically like a hub for their multiverse that, if you ask them, literally exists. So they can like walk through the facets of the polyhedron into different worlds, or so they believe, or maybe those are just hallucinations, who knows.
Yep.
And then it was also created by the Kane family for a purpose, for a very specific purpose that we will explore in Pathologic 3. Wishlist now.
Yes, wishlist now. Very, very good. Well, thank you, because you started off by saying you weren't going to tell me anything, and you told me lots of things, so thank you. I appreciate you indulging me there. Yeah, I love Pathologic too. I think everybody should play it. I've had a bit of fun with the demo of Quarantine, Pathologic 3, which I do want to, and joking aside, people should wishlist, because it does do a lot for indie studios. I've heard a lot over the last year or so doing this podcast how important it is to studios for wishlist, so please do that and give the demo a try. In the demo, so you have apathy and mania are your key mechanics, which I actually really liked. And for spoilers, if anyone thinks that it is a completely easy ride dealing with just apathy and mania versus like the other list of survival mechanics, I can tell everybody that my time with the demo did end with the Bachelor pointing a gun to his face and blowing his brains out. So you absolutely can have a hard time. So just talk to me a little bit about the decision to go with apathy and mania, and what seems to be a much more psychological survival mechanic in the Bachelor.
Yeah, so when we envisioned originally, when we were making Pathologic 2, we created this sort of vision documents that were very abstract, but they still serve as guidelines for us up until this day. We discussed how each of the protagonists deals with, let's say, different elements, and the one of the simpler delineations between them was that the Haraspix is about the body, the Bachelor is about the mind, and the Changeling is about the soul. So we just lean into this more heavily. Then we had the issue of the Haraspix starts as a pariah. People think he's a criminal, people think he's a patricide, so he's hunted, and you have this very classic sort of action movie style conflict between him and the society around him. He needs to get his reputation back in order, he needs to survive, he needs to hide, he needs to fight. It's a bit simpler, surprisingly, than telling a story of a person who is respected by the town's elites. So he's a celebrity, he's a superstar, he's provided for. When he arrives to the town, people are like, please guide us.
Yeah.
And that should be empowering to the player, but obviously also that doesn't create enough conflict at the service level, at least. So we figured that the main enemy of a smart person and respected person is himself, and we thought about how we can make the Bachelor the antagonist for the Bachelor, which is why you both keep struggling with your own mind and with like your psychological status, but also at the start of the game, you are your main opponent, because the story starts at day 5, so it begins in medias res, which means in the middle of things, not at the beginning. And what you need to do first is deal with your poor decisions that you made before the game started. So like in the first days of the plague, which again makes the Bachelor the main antagonist for the Bachelor at the start, which we feel that fits really well with this idea of him as a person who is kind of lost in time and kind of confused about what exactly he is and what exactly he was doing in this town, because the premise is that he has a lab that studies immortality. He wants to defeat death. Basically, he wants to find immortality in simple terms. And he is persecuted by the authorities, by the powers that be in the capital. He hears a rumor that there is an immortal man in the town, and he arrives here in the hopes of basically finding proof that immortality exists. That's why he is here. And then suddenly he's kind of confused about what's happening with him and around him and what this is all about. And obviously this is somehow tied to the secret of the immortality of the man he was after. And you will have to figure out how. So what I'm saying here is that we felt that while absolutely, so the game has you actually manage the town, you issue decrees that define like how the town lives, what people do, you see the results in the streets, and this is all this sort of administrative power fantasy, like of a person running a town. But again, since Bachelor obviously has issues doing that, and there will be struggles, there will be conflict, there will be like town politics to deal with and stuff like that, and resource management. We felt that that's still not poignant enough because, generally speaking, the leaders of this town respect you. And like, okay, fair enough. So what's the struggle here? And the struggle here is with yourself, which we feel is interesting.
I thought it was interesting, yeah. I mean, and the way it's communicated as well, like if your apathy is too high, you kind of get these remarks from him to himself where he's just kind of dismissive of people's interests and emotions, and you can't do some of the things that you'd normally be able to do. And if you're allowed to get too high, as I already said, you end up blowing your brains out. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. And so there's also another part of what I think were survival mechanics, I suppose, and that's your time management. You have already talked a little bit about time travel, but just sticking with the theme of managing your mental state, I thought it was really interesting that you could euthanize people to gain time back, right? So just what can you tell me about, and I'll just add to that as well. So I noticed that navigation is slightly different as well. So obviously, like a big part of Pathologic 2 was managing your time and picking very carefully which areas you go through. And it's slightly different now. So the gates have clocks above them, and as I say, you can gain time, and you obviously said that you can use time in interesting ways. And there's also now there seems to be like a calculation that you can make, right? Where let's say you need to get to the gut, and it will give you like an outline of a map, and you will find that if your route goes through like an infected area, you need to go through that infected area. But it all affects the amount of time that you're going to use. So, yeah, just broadly speaking, can you tell me a little bit about where your heads are at with time travel, and that as a survival mechanic, and how that's going to affect people's play?
Woof. That's a huge can of worms. First of all, yes, you will have to manage time. You will have more things to do than you have time to do it. And just to be clear, you couldn't plan your route in quarantine, but you can do it in the main game. We just cut it off from the demo. So yes, planning your route through the city is still a huge part of the game, even though it's done in a different way. As for the rest of it, there is this sort of weird resource in the game called amalgam. I think it is in English. Yeah. So it's the silver amalgam is the thing that you have in old mirrors, which reflects stuff, and you use this resource to travel in time. How is this? And yes, you do gain this resource if you euthanize dying patients, because you kind of absorb their last minutes. Let me put it this way. I feel that there is no way I won't do a disservice to exploring this theme if I just try to explain to you the connection between all those things. So I'll just say that time and its connection to death and the lack thereof are the central elements of the story. It's the facet that the game explores. So very, 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 very many things in the game look back to the concept of time and how we perceive it and how we use it. And obviously, our imaginary amalgam does not exist in real life, but we added this element to the story to, how should I put it? To explore the importance of time and better, and to present time in a somewhat different manner in the game than we perceive it in real life. That all sounds confusing. What I'm basically saying is that time is probably the crucial element in the game. Time as a concept. So it will be explored in detail.
Thank you. Now, that nicely segues into my next question, which is sort of time related, and we're going to do fan questions next. Obviously, the demo's out, and I'll say again, everyone should go and wishlist Pathologic 3. But do you have a rough idea of when the full game is going to be released, or can you not? Can you talk about that at all?
I do have a pretty good idea, but I won't tell it out loud because the studio kind of has a history with bad promises in terms of time management, and I will only tell the date when I'm like absolutely certain. Yes, we do have a date planned. The production revolves around that date, but not announcing it yet. Sorry.
Fair enough. Now,
Let's just say Rockstar did us a favor.
okay. Well, people can work that out then. Rockstar, yeah, that's so funny. So we've got fan questions now, which I hope will be a little bit more interesting than mine. Freddy Fazbear, you can guess which other game they like, I suppose. And these are all from Reddit, by the way, so they're Reddit usernames that I'm reading out, which can be a whole mixture of stuff, as you can imagine. One of my favourite things when I read the Pathologic 2 art book was seeing references to literature and film, e.g., The Master and Margarita and Twin Peaks. Seeing how you all looked at other works of art to pull from. With that in mind, what would you say is one book, one film, and one game that has most heavily influenced the direction of Patho 3?
One
One book,
movie.
one film, yeah, one game.
Whoa. Okay. uh, I feel that my answer about the book will be technically correct and also extremely tried because the main writer for the game, Alexei Polarinov, is actually a renowned writer, and since he writes most of the like a renowned writer, mostly in Russian, but his works are translated.
Yep.
And since he writes most of the fiction, the dialogues, I suppose the books that Pathologic 3 most closely resembles are his books. So that's obviously not what the question was about. So let me think a bit about it a second. As for the movie, again, boring answer, but Memento. Probably the best
Memento.
movie that deals with it's not about time travel. It's about storytelling through quote unquote time travel.
Yeah.
So probably the best movie Nolan has made, and I learned a lot from it. Like I think it's a great exercise in misdirection. So
it's also very disco, I should say, as well, because it's about people trying to understand who they are and what they're piecing together in their past and stuff like that. So
absolutely, yeah. And also I really like the ending because I feel that it elevates the movie from being just a fun exercise in nonlinear storytelling, like in reverse order storytelling, to like a movie that actually asks an interesting question, like about how you need a purpose to drive you and what lengths you would be willing to go to still have it in your life. So great movie, really love it. Then the game.
Yeah.
What is the question?
Pathologic 2, I suppose. Pathologic 1.
Well, yeah, again, but just like with the book, it's a boring answer. Okay, so for the book, another very boring but more enlightening answer would be The Young Doctor's Notebook by Mikhail Bulgakov, which is, there is actually a very cute short TV series where Daniel Radcliffe plays the main character. I kind of liked it. So Bulgakov wrote Master and Margarita that you've already mentioned, but he was a doctor himself, and he wrote short stories that kind of became this sort of like mini novel about the hardship of being a rural doctor among, like, when you have basically no medicine, no equipment, you have very uneducated people that you need to save, and like you have to struggle with the backwardness of the world. And then he was Bulgakov himself also had morphine addiction. that was actually a serious problem. And
sounded very familiar here.
yeah, and he wrote another novel called Morphine, which was about a young doctor getting a morphine addiction because of the struggles of his life. And yeah, if it all sounds a bit familiar, it's because it is. Obviously, even the original version of The Bachelor was informed and inspired by Bulgakov, and we're not shying away from this reference because, let's face it, he's cool. And also, in Master and Margarita that you've mentioned, which is the most famous of Bulgakov's novels, the characters deal with the supernatural. So, like, it's the story of the devil arriving to, like, the 30th, I believe, Moscow, basically to the young Soviet Union, which is a state that denies the existence of God. And it's like about the devil walking among all those self-proclaimed atheists and being puzzled by them. And I feel that this clash of ideologies is also very much pathologic. So basically, you could maybe say all of Bulgakov's works.
Yeah, nice.
And as for the game, I would say that for me, it's the lack of very good detective games. So there are a number of games that I haven't tried yet that may be good detective games, but basically I always felt that like there is this a series of Sherlock Holmes games that are really interesting that use the medium to create great mysteries. But generally speaking, at least before, way too many detective games were about just doing things in the right order. So with The Bachelor, who relies more heavily on his brains to solve mysteries and figure stuff out. We want to try implementing detective mechanics in a bigger story, and that's an interesting game design challenge. So, like, I don't know. I talked about you asked about movies, and I didn't mention Doctor House, but the comparison is there because with The Bachelor, you play as this sort of medicine detective, a person who basically has to solve someone's life to diagnose them.
I completely forgot to mention that, by the way, and it was on my list of questions. But yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad we got there now. Yeah, the detective side of things. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah. No, I really liked that part of the demo actually, because sorry, I'm interrupting you here, but I wanted to just mention the fact that it was quite that was something that really interested me, like the inspection of the body, looking for doing that whole process of elimination of symptoms. And then there's the third patient in the game in the demo where you then have to go out and question people, and you can also like highlight and you can see all these clues in the Bachelor's thoughts, right? So I just wanted to say that I really, really loved that idea, and I'm glad to hear that actually when we talk about an influencer game, I think it's quite fascinating actually that you're inspired by the fact that there's an absence of really good detective games. I think that's really
again, just to be clear. So, for example, there are games like I don't know, The Return to Oberdeen, which is an incredible detective game.
Yeah.
And The Case of Golden Idol and The Root Trees Are Dead, for example. So there are very interesting detective games, and I don't know. It's probably not a coincidence that we generally have 3 patients per day because all those games I've mentioned check your answers for being correct or incorrect when you fill in 3 of them. I think. Actually, I'm not sure if Golden Idol does that. Whatever. Maybe gaslighting myself. What I'm saying is that there are great detective games on the market, but all the games I mentioned are very dedicated puzzle games. And introducing these detective mechanics to a game with a broader story, basically an immersive first-person game where you walk around, talk to people, you have this huge plot around it all and above it all, is something that has probably been done, but not to the extent it deserves. Let me put it that way. So we feel that, like me personally, I'm very inspired by various types of detective games.
Nope, well covered. I think we got there. Evil Forska says, as a lead translator, what were the biggest challenges outside of the amount of text? What were the choices that felt easy and natural? And are there lines or terms you prefer in one language or another? That's 3 questions, greedy. But I mean, I guess just generally, what are the biggest challenges for you doing translation? Yeah, answer that.
Uh, the two main challenges are that English sounds nothing like Russian in terms of, let's say, cadence. And like when I was doing the translation for Pathologic 2, I checked the translations of Dostoevsky, for example, into English, and it sounds nothing like Dostoevsky. Again, the translations are good; they're not misleading or anything. It's just that the cadence of the language is so different that it's a completely different vibe.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to just come to terms with the fact that the vibe of the game in English will be different from Russian, and that nothing can be done about that. And the second issue is that while I have a fluent grasp of English, and I can double check the work of another translator in English, even if sometimes I personally can't coin the best phrase in English, I can see when someone else does. I don't have this luxury at all in other languages, and neither does Konstantin, who is our current localization manager. So, since with Pathologic 3 we want to do a couple more localizations at the game's release, like Brazilian, Portuguese, and Chinese, we the quality of literature is very, very important to us. It's important to have interesting characters and interesting conflicts, but it's also important to uh, find the good verbiage, the interesting, well-written verbiage for these ideas. And I can kind of vouch that it will work in Russian and English, but I can't vouch for the other languages, even though we are looking for competent editors that can double check that and all that. Still, we can't check personally. And for me, that's anxiety inducing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Okay, so we've got Jetpack Bear 22. The 22nd of the Jetpack Bears, I think, is meant by that. Again, they got quite a lot of questions, but well, there's 3 questions, but 2 of them are quite quick. I mean, you kind of covered this already, I think, but what lessons from Pathologic 2 are you keeping close in mind for Pathologic 3? I know the studio weren't particularly happy with how often players bounced off the first 2 games, but yeah, I mean, we kind of covered this about the fact that being challenging games is part of the draw.
And
That,
also part of the repulsion, yes.
yeah,
So, like,
exactly. So it's a
these
difficult
are
balance to
games
strike.
that people watch on YouTube instead of playing, and that is an issue, both artistically, because, you know, when you create the experience, you want people to experience it, funnily enough, and also commercially, because obviously, like, some people would watch a game on YouTube and then buy it, and some people won't. And, you know, you kind of want to make the next game, and to do that, you need some people to buy your game, and for that, you need them to want to play it. And then when you look at the numbers, you're like, why don't we just make another card-based roguelite? Like,
Yeah,
people would buy that.
yeah.
But obviously that is a joke, in case that wasn't obvious. But
I can't wait
yeah.
for the Pathologic roguelike card game myself, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Honestly, something to explore for the changeling. Like, you can do bad
yeah,
stuff to people with cards.
yeah. Will Pathologic 3 get an art book? Was the second question.
It's not currently planned because we have a different structure of the art department
Mhm.
these days, but we are considering something, and that something will probably be small enough. It will probably be too small to be called an art book, but maybe like some I don't know, digital compilations of our intermediate works. Intermediary is the term. Basically, like concept art is what I'm trying to say. That is something we will consider for the supporters pack slash deluxe edition slash whatever, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And this is a more interesting question, I think, certainly for fans and long-term fans. I always loved that Artemy's backstory was expanded to include his childhood with Lara, Rubin, Bad Grief, and the fact that Artemy interacts with children far more to the point that he actually adopts two and attempts to even adopt Grace and Tyre. So in terms of story volume, will Pathologic 3 have a much more expanded version of the Bachelor's story, similar to that of the Haruspecs?
First of all, yes, the story is just much larger, and uh, people hate me for that because I may have bloated it a bit. I don't know. Basically, the amount of story we have in Pathologic 3 is more than in the whole of Pathologic 1 combined. It's a big
Wow.
story. There are more events, more things happening, more stuff. And in addition to that, the Bachelor's backstory is expanded upon as well. So we'll learn more about his time at the capital. Not like it won't be a fully playable or whatever, but the original. So here's the thing. Okay, it's actually not as obvious as it seems because uh, the game is hermetic in that you are locked in this town and nothing in the world exists aside from this town. Like, obviously, we are told that there is a capital, there is a country, there is a war, someone arrives from outside, but we are. Like, in these, again, detective stories where people are locked in a hotel, for example, and have to figure out who the killer is. It's the same here. You are all like in, I don't know, Carnage, the movie, for example. There is this genre of movies where people and plays where people are locked in a single room and have to figure out their differences.
Yep.
And Pathologic is structured like that. So actually, while showing memories and hints of the capital makes sense, actually making too much content there, I feel, erodes this feeling, this claustrophobic feeling that you are locked in this town. And for the Bachelor, it's a very unpleasant claustrophobic feeling because he's a celebrity from the capital. He's well educated. He's used to a completely different type of life. And then he arrives to this rural town and he can't leave and he wants to. So we introduced the capital and characters from there and Thanatica in the flesh mostly to so that the words of the Bachelor who wants to leave were not baseless for the player. So we want the player to experience them a bit to emphasize with the Bachelor who wants to leave. But it doesn't mean you get to. Well, you can try.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting, and I think that's the great thing about the evolution of these stories through the sequels. I think is that, as I said earlier, for me, as someone who didn't experience Pathologic 1, probably will one day, but it's very exciting for me that we're going to get more and more expansion, and I hope it continues on that trend. So very, very cool. When jumping from Pathologic 1 to Pathologic 2, and this is a similar question really, I suppose, some of the non-protagonist main characters ended up being changed from their original roles, the biggest example being Oyun, who goes from being one of the Haruspecs' biggest roadblocks in Pathologic 1 to an actually helpful ally in acquiring the living blood to make more panacea in Pathologic 2. I'd just like to know, are there any other characters who you think will have undergone a sort of reimagining from their original planned roles that you'd like to talk about and give your thoughts on?
Well, there were no changes to the role in that we wouldn't just take a character and make them a different person. There are elaborations, and there are some characters that didn't just get enough interesting screen time and whose character was not well defined. For example, one aspect that we were thinking about is that in the original story, in the original Pathologic, the Kane's family, the characters who support the Bachelor and who invited him, well, technically not them, doesn't matter. They were a bit too united. So, they were like this force that worked together. And we feel that it is more interesting for them to have their differences and maybe to have different agendas that don't necessarily always coincide. They did have some conflicts in the original, but we feel that we can explore them more deeply. And that, in turn, makes characters better defined. So they become like when a character's personal agenda is defined more deeply, you learn more about them, naturally. Also, there are some concepts that we revived from the very, very first design documents that came before Pathologic 1 and that didn't make it into Pathologic 1. One example would be that Maria Kaina, the heiress to the Kane family, originally there was this idea that she had a circle of, let's say, followers in the town who would play some weird esoteric games, something akin to the Babylonian lottery. They would it would be something between a live action RPG and sort of performance that they would make, and it basically that all young people in the town who followed Maria were involved in some sort of huge game that maybe involved changing their fates. And those characters, like this group, were called the Signs, as in the astrological signs, in the very, very old design documents. They didn't make it in Pathologic 1, although we do see them in the final cutscene for the Utopians. So there are implications that the young people of the town follow Maria, but no elaboration. It wasn't obvious in Pathologic 2 because it focused on the Haraspics, but now we can explore this idea. So that's one kind of random example of how we take the old ideas and introduce them back, because we do have this opportunity to elaborate on the lore of various characters. And also, again, it's very important that the stories are told through subjective lens. So the Haraspics and the Bachelor can see the same character in very different light, up to the point of that character behaving, well, not fully differently, so their personality won't just change completely. But the emphasis would be different. And one example of that would be Yeva Yan, who is Daniel's companion. He lives in her house, and she's just this sort of weirdo wannabe her bride for the Haraspics. But she becomes a very crucial soulmate and mentor, and just a very important person for the Bachelor, and he physically sees her differently. The character model has changed, but she was changed not because we just want to randomly change models, but to reflect how different characters perceive other different characters.
Interesting. Okay, that question was from Sai Para, by the way. I didn't mention their surnames, so I thought I'd just get that, and I hope you liked that answer. I thought it was very candid of you, actually, to give that much detail. Thank you. Bumbasaur, you can guess what their favourite game of all time probably is. Very, very simple one. Will The Void ever return as a sequel or in any other form, do you think, from Icepeak Lodge?
No such plans, no. I really think that after we finish with the Pathologic Epic, we should focus on new IPs and ideas, of which we have a lot. We just do feel that we have a commitment to finish the Pathologic trilogy, or what is it?
Quadrilogy at this point? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Pathologic, that we should tell the stories of the Haraspics, the Bachelor, and the Changeling as separate games.
Yep.
We want to do that because doing otherwise would be unfair to the other characters and their stories that we want to tell. But after that, we feel that we should focus on other games and not our previous IPs.
Yep, fair enough. This is an interesting one. So from Friendly Mode, I wonder if Alphyna ever got in touch with Felipe Ramos' essay on Pathologic 2, which basically created all of the Pathologic buzz here in Brazil. I had finished my translation by the time he uploaded the video, and I'm 100% certain that game wouldn't have reached the many people it did without this particular essay. So I guess, are you aware of that?
Yes, of course, absolutely. And we did try to get in touch with him. We sent codes for quarantine to him before it was released and stuff like that. To my knowledge, he hasn't responded, but we will keep trying to get in touch.
Yeah, and then there was the last line there. You mentioned in an interview that it's interesting to see how Pathologic has resonated with different cultures from around the world. And I guess they didn't actually ask a question. They said I think it would make a nice topic. So I guess just share your feelings on how it does make you feel to see Pathologic resonated
Yeah,
with us.
it's actually very interesting. I reflected a lot on Pathologic's popularity in Brazil. I was only in Brazil once. I visited São Paulo, and it made quite an impression upon me. It's it it's a town of extremes because it has incredible architecture, incredibly beautiful, very awe-inspiring, and then it has this striking poverty and, well, sense of unease in the streets.
I'm
Because, like,
I'm dying to just add here because, as it happens, it's the only Brazilian city I've visited, and what you're saying now is exactly. Whenever I speak to people about Sao Paulo, I'm like, you cannot imagine how quick you can walk from one street to another and see the complete gulf in wealth inequality. It's crazy, right?
absolutely. And I was both humbled and inspired by, like, the cathedral, for example, and not gonna lie, I was very uneasy in the street because I didn't feel safe there. And it kind of resembles Pathologic, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a surprise to me, but the more I reflected upon it, the more I feel that Pathologic can find resonance with people who live in places of a stark social inequality and, like, this divide between people, and b places with a history, places where you would have this, like, grandiose buildings, for example. And again, San Paulo is an incredible example here because it's not just that it has wealthy people and poor people, lots of places do. It also has this sort of aspiration to be a cultural gem, and crime and poverty
Yeah.
in the same place. I think that this contrast is even more important for Pathologic of people aspiring to do something greater on the background of people suffering from very mundane and simple things like, I don't know, hunger, for example. So I feel that there are a lot of places in the world with juxtapositions like that. And I feel that maybe Pathologic can find resonance with people living there.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating place. Really loved my time there. Though. I was there during the World Cup actually, so it was good fun. Danny Rainbow asks, other than the protagonists or the healers, who are Alphyna's favourite characters in the game?
You don't get to have favorite characters when you're a writer. If you play favorites, it's like being a teacher, if you play favorites, you failed as a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm joking, but not really. I can get myself into the headspace of loving any particular character, and if I can't, I need to work more and be able to do that. So I genuinely don't have favorites. I love them all. I enjoy them all equally.
It's I don't know if you've seen the interview I did with Argo Tulak specifically on Disco Elysium, not the Zayn one, but he has a similar kind of philosophy about the characters he created, and I find it interesting. He views them as living, breathing people who he loves and cares for, and has a similar philosophy, I guess, to you in that it's kind of like trying to choose your favorite child or your favorite dog or something like that. It's just not fair to pick one out, right? You love them all equally. So I was fascinated by creators and writers and the attachment that they have to their creations. It's nice.
I feel that, and this is about me as a person. I personally like the way you describe Argo's approach to it comes from empathy in terms of Disco Elysium skills, but my personal approach mostly comes from rhetoric, I'd say. I'm more of a devil's advocate type of person, so it has always been kind of easy for me to just, like, let's say this, I don't know, unpleasant person is right. Let's say they have their own truth. What would it be? And it just comes naturally to me to twist my mind in ways that allow for any truth to sound reasonable while I'm in this headspace. And I think it's helpful for writing.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Flantasy Flan, which is probably my favourite name so far. Sorry to all the other names. You kind of already asked this, but I'll just read just so they get their airtime. But so they did ask about the inspiration and philosophy with updating characters' visuals, and you've already kind of touched on that and a different perspective. So we have kind of answered that already, Fantasy Flan. So I hope you're satisfied with what we got there. And then one more fan question, then we're going to talk about Disco Elysium very quickly, because I'm conscious that I've kept you for nearly 2 hours. Is there anything that Pathologic perhaps cannot accomplish that Alphyna would like to see explored by other game developers, be it a game mechanic, story concept, etc.? That's an interesting question. What's missing? What's missing from games, I suppose, is the question that you'd like to see explored more.
What's missing from games that we can't explore? Okay, I know that there are. So some people at the studio, as far as I know, are very interested in the feel of games, in the way they recreate sensory experiences. Let me put it this way. And I'm not talking about like Kinect or VR or whatever. I'm talking about classic ordinary games and the ways we can model interactions with the physical world within those games. Because everything that we see in a game is a model. Very few games strive to recreate real-life experiences one for one. For example, in a video game, when you need to reload a gun, you just press R, right? So I've recently seen a concept of a video game where you reload a gun by actually clicking every single element of a gun that you would need to in real life. So, like, you need to. I have no idea how every part of that is called, but basically, like, the part where the bullets go, so you unlock it, then you take the bullets from it, then you put new bullets in, and like click a lot of stuff. I'm not a gun person, okay? Obviously, so on the one hand, it's an incredibly annoying process. On the other hand, it's interesting because it's unique. Generally speaking, it's interesting but uninventive because we don't recreate experiences one for one when we create art. We instead like perform this process of analyzing an experience, figuring out what the most important elements of it are. So I don't know, for example, for reloading a gun, it can be the period of downtime when you are when you don't have a weapon and so you are vulnerable, and the satisfying click it makes when you finally load it, and then we emphasize those experiences in a game, but we don't have to recreate the actual real life process of doing something. And that process of analyzing something, figuring out the most important elements, eliminating the rest, and just keeping the interesting parts is called modeling. In a very specific sense of the word modeling, there are other meanings of the word as well. Sorry. I feel that I know that some of my colleagues, for example, believe that games don't do enough interesting modeling of, like I said, sensory experiences. And I won't even touch the subject of sex because that is actually a very interesting sensory experience that is incredibly hard to model and like gets modeled for I won't say for the wrong reasons, but not for the most interesting reasons that it can. And that's just one example. But all that comes before a huge but by me, because I personally am not that interested in this aspect. I'm just not an extremely sensory person in general, and just not a thing that interests me personally. So I feel that the things that I am interested in, we can do. My most recent interest, generally speaking, in video games is the so-called actually what's it called, the rule acquisition gameplay, knowledge acquisition gameplay, basically games like Outer Wilds and Tunic and Blueprints, where
I'm so glad you said Blueprints.
Yes, probably my game of the year, except for Pathologic 3, of course. Really loved it. I very, very much enjoy this process of allowing a person, like letting a person in the world where they can do stuff, but they don't know that they can do that stuff. And like their progression is not gaining stats or finding items, it's figuring out what you can do in this world. It's an incredible type of gameplay. There are not enough games that do that. One more I forgot to mention would probably be Antichamber, that I also really, really like. And also lesser known games like Lingo and Lingo 2, which are like Antichamber but with words. I recommend them. Basically, this is, for example, the type of gameplay that I personally would like to explore, and I don't know if I have the talent to do it, but we definitely have the capabilities. So
Of course, yeah.
it's just a matter of if we can actually create interesting, this sort of knowledge acquisition type gameplay.
Amazing. Did you have a notepad and pen for your time with blueprints? I know a lot of people do that.
I screenshotted, but I have this vast folder of screenshots.
Yeah.
Wow. And also this, I connected things in Paint and drew letters on the grid in Paint and stuff like that. It was incredible.
Yeah, and it just sprung to mind because as a sensory experience or connecting players to different elements of gameplay, I thought that was a really interesting thing, and it was something that they actually said, get yourself a notepad because it will come in handy, and I did really like that. Right.
That sounds ominous.
Yeah, I do. So that is all of my Pathologic questions, and I hope all the fans are happy with your answers because I was. And thank you so much for giving such an insight into the way you think as well. It's been really fascinating for me. Now we're into an arena that I really do understand, and it's Disco Elysium. Now I know you're a big fan of the game, but I did not know that you were involved with the translation of Disco Elysium, the localization in Russian. So, my first question: how did that come about? First of all, I think it's quite incredible that you have a hand in two of, for me, the best narrative-driven games of all time. So, big trophy for you, Alphyna, for that achievement. I would like to know. Yeah, just tell us how you got involved with Disco Elysium and how that came about, because I understand it was originally a kind of fan-driven thing, and eventually you did such a good job that you ended up talking with a team. So tell me about your experience.
Well, actually, the story is questionable because So here's how it went. I played Disco Elysium. I really loved it. I played it day one when it released, and I started hyping it immediately because somehow I knew about it before it was on my wishlist and whatever. So I wrote to the team and said, "Hey, I'm the localization lead for Pathologic 2 and the writer of Pathologic 2. How about I translate your game?" And they got back in touch with me and said, "Hey, so we have a fan team who are doing the Russian translation. Would you like to supervise them?" And I was like, absolutely, especially since I knew a couple of people on that team, from online spaces, basically. And it all was extremely sweet up until the point where Zaum got in touch with us and said, "Hey, we've decided to change your team to a professional translator team. So sorry about that. Unfortunately, we can't use any of your work for legal reasons. Here's a complimentary T-shirt." That's a joke. There was no T-shirt, and actually the fans were compensated for their work, so that was nice of them. But their work was not used. However, for me personally, they approached me and asked if I would like to remain on the team as a professional translator, because I am. Unlike the fans who did not have, the credentials to do that. So I did a test task and joined the Testronic professional team of translators as just one of the translators. But I did a lot of work for the official Russian localization. So I did the first 2 hours of the game and all the best dialogues, because I was the biggest fan of the game on the team, I think, and they just let me grab whatever dialogue I wanted.
Yeah, it's an interesting fact that I only realised very recently, actually, that Pathologic 2 came out the same year as Disco Elysium. I think I even the original.
What a great year!
I know. Someone highlighted how great 2019 was recently on Blue Sky, and I was like, well, actually, Pathologic 2 also came out that year. Because I'm one of those guys now, I'm late to the party, and now all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, we should play Pathologic 2. I've become that guy who's telling everyone to go play Pathologic.
Please never change.
Yeah, I will never change. So, did you have much to do with this golden group of Zaum writers? You know, Robert, Argo, Helen, Alexander. There are many others who I can't remember to list them all. Martin Luiga. Did you have anything to do with any of those people in your time, or was it just
Nope.
kind of no, just handed a bunch of
Zero.
text?
Sorry, zero contact with any of those people. Our point of contact was Chris Priestman, and we also were in touch with Mr. Kander at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But we were kind of so the communication was actually structured really well. I enjoyed it. We were provided all the texts, and we were provided access to the in-game script writing engine called Artisy. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
we could take a look at how each line is connected to other lines for context.
Yeah.
It was more work for us, but it allowed us to actually make sensible translations and ask way fewer questions because we always knew the context for each line. So that was done well, and we it's a standard procedure for localization. We did have this spreadsheet where we could ask any question, like about the context, about any item. We were also provided the lore encyclopedia and whatever. And the fun thing is that they did have a glossary of terms translated into Russian by their, I don't know, like some person that they worked with previously, a friend of theirs, so we could rely on that as well.
Yeah.
It was all really well done, but in terms of personal contact, there wasn't much.
No. Well,
Which is a shame. I would obviously like to, and be very honored to have a conversation with any of those people, but
yeah, I'm trying to make my way through as many of them as I can. Obviously, but it's harder than it's harder than ever now. Obviously, because everyone's kind of hunkered down, either doing their own things or hiding for whatever reasons they've got to hide, which is a shame. I mean, I'm not going to go over all of the ins and outs of how that, because everybody knows by now. But it's just a sad ending to what was a wonderful studio. How important is disco to you personally, Alphyna?
Very much so, for a vast number of reasons. First of all, it is the genuine spiritual successor to Planescape Torment. And you must understand that that game is like a cornerstone of my personality. It is genuinely very, very important to me. I've played it multiple times, and there were a number of attempts to create spiritual successors, which were close in terms of scope and setting and whatever, but which were not spiritual successors. And then comes Disco Elysium, which is, even though it's a game in a completely different setting, with a completely different story, revolving around completely different themes, it doesn't matter. It is the first CRPG that kind of hit the same sweet spot. Secondly, it's a very non-American game, and that's important.
Yeah.
Because it takes place in a fictional world, as many other games do, but it's very clear that the cultural background that informed its creation was not USA-centric.
Yep.
As it is with many, even fictional worlds, the problems that the game was discussing were not USA-centric. And that was so refreshing. Like, it's... I'm not sure how often it is discussed that this is what makes it so much a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. And those are two, like, less obvious reasons. It's just that the combination, the tragicomedy, the combination of humor and tragedy, the combination of poetism and grounded critique that we see in Disco Elysium is exactly what I'm looking for in art.
Yeah.
So it's like it was tailor-made for me,
Yeah. No, and it's funny now. You obviously see all over the internet lots of Americans who do not have much experience of what Europe even is, and you'll regularly get posts online. Oh, it looks just like Disco Elysium, and it's just like some, I don't know, European town somewhere, and us Europeans are like, yeah, we know that we see it all the time.
And like obviously, with some coming from a post-Soviet country and some of them speaking Russian, there are elements of the game that are, I just recognize them, like the word
Yeah.
tar that is used in the game for, I don't even know, does the
And
word exist in English?
no,
But it's
I never heard it. No, for
but
emptying
it, but
beer
it's
bottles and stuff.
but it's so known to any post-Soviet person because собирать тару is a thing that people would do after the collapse of the Soviet
Yeah,
Union to like get a living. Like basically, it's what poor people would do to get some money, and
yeah,
like um. So recognition is the lowest form of entertainment. When you see something in a piece of media and you're like Leonardo DiCaprio in that meme who goes like, hey, I know that thing.
yeah,
It's a very simple joy, but still it was so very much joyful to see this. So not a Soviet setting, because there are a lot of Soviet settings,
yeah,
but this specifically kind of distantly post-Soviet setting. It
yeah,
was it very much resembled my own life in like the tens, for example, in many ways. So that's why it hits so closely to home
yeah,
for me personally.
yeah. I can see that. And there's obviously the word Bretan is of Russian origin, right? Is that
Yeah, yeah,
correct? Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And there is honestly, they also like referenced a meme that was popular in so in Russian in the Russian internet, and they use the sorry, semi-slur term libtard. That's again and liberast. It was liberast. That is literally used by like when people argue about politics in the Russian language. And again, it's not just that it's a culture connected to the Soviet culture. It's connected to the online circles that I was in like 2008,
Yeah,
and that's just another level of recognition.
yeah, yeah.
But again, the game has a lot of merit apart from that. It's just something that obviously scratches my personal itches.
yeah. I spoke to a lady called Volya Kapitanava, who I think
Mhm.
you know actually.
Yeah, yeah. She worked on the fan translation and she was the community manager.
That's right. Yeah. And I think she's from Belarus, right? I
Yes.
think. And I asked her why she loves Disco Elysium, and she said, "Well, because it's for depressed communists, depressed post-Soviet communists," and that's exactly what I get a lot from people who played it in post-Soviet countries, and yeah, that recognition side of thing I think is really important to a lot of people. They feel seen, I think, is what they would say. Um, so I've obviously praised Pathologic in this conversation, and I genuinely believe now that there are two pillars of narrative-driven games, and they are the two best. That's Disco Elysium and Pathologic. Obviously, my experience is Pathologic too, but it was the first time to get, if I could give the highest praise to Pathologic 2. I had been looking for something to make me feel the way that Disco Elysium had, obviously, since I played it. And Pathologic 2 was the first time that I'd felt that I was like, that is what I have been craving. And it was there the whole time. How does it feel for you as a fan of Disco Elysium and someone who is obviously a huge part of Pathologic to hear that comparison? And it happens a lot online. Lots of people make the comparison. So how does that make you feel as a fan and a creator of the two?
Well, flattered, of course. How else would it make me feel?
Yeah.
It is a very huge compliment, and I understand. I think I understand the structural reasons for the comparison, because there is this mixture of high art and depression in both games, and also both have very robust settings informed by many years of mulling them over. So, like for Zaum, it was a setting created for their games. For Pathologic, it's more like the first game was released, and then there were years upon years of iterating and fleshing out the setting. And the settings themselves are a bit eclectic, I would
Mhm.
say.
Yep.
And again, this is kind of similar. So while the vibes are a bit different in that Disco Elysium is a bit more tongue-in-cheek, and Pathologic is kind of takes itself very seriously sometimes. I think there are enough structural similarities between the games and their worlds and their reasons for existence.
Yeah, and I also think that the two games achieve the most fascinating level of meta fourth wall breaking storytelling that I've ever seen. So there's obviously there's an element of Pathologic where you are in a play and you are playing a role and you are an actor and you have a responsibility to take on that role and play it however you want. And there's lots of fourth wall breaking, obviously, with the tragedarian. Is it tragedarian? They're called
Tragedians.
yeah, tragedians.
Tragedians.
And there's obviously the Pale, which is again like a completely mind-bending meta level. So I think you both deserve credit for breaking the fourth wall in a mature way that is still cool, because there's kind of nothing worse in a TV show than someone going "hey" towards the camera, right, and saying the title of the film or something like that. It's just a bit silly, but I thought both titles handled it in such an incredibly fascinating way. So yeah, I've got lots of praise for both of them on what they've achieved there. Now, fun questions about Disco Elysium. Who is your favourite character in Disco Elysium?
Still, I don't play favorites. Although with another person's fiction, it's easier. I just really good pieces of art don't rely on you liking characters. The characters exist there for other reasons than for you to like or dislike them.
Yep.
They exist there to explore certain subjects or certain elements and stuff like that. And that is an aspect that I find more interesting. So I can tell you what characters I found the most interesting vessels in this game.
Go for it.
I really, and this will be the most unexpected answer, I suppose, liked Gary, the crypto-fascist, because I feel that his character was an actual, genuine exploration of how people who are not necessarily deeply evil become right-wingers and like this sort of pathetic right-wingers, because and I really like how empathetic the game is towards him, because it's like he was written by a person who actually understands that this is someone who is wrong and pathetic and suffering.
Yeah.
He became what he is because he feels that he lives a pathetic life in a town that is doomed, that has no future and no dignity. And all he really wants is to have dignity, because like he feels that delivering vegan pizza or whatever it is he's doing is humiliating. And then he kind of, since he has this sort of pattern recognizing brain, he tries to explain to himself how that is possible, and comes to this sort of racist conspiracy because he just can't come to terms with with how pathetic his life is otherwise. And it all makes sense. And it's not written to condemn him, it's kind of written to explain him. And I think that it's very valuable to understand how it happens in real life, because this is how we can change that feeling in some people without racist conspiracy theories. So, for example, I think that he is a very well written character. Another thing that I really liked are some of the weird older women like Lena and Pleasance, because again, this is a demographic that very rarely gets to tell their own truth. And yes, they are funny, and yes, they believe weird stuff. But again, Lena is portrayed very, very empathetically. She is a complicated person. She's again kind of low-key racist, but she's also extremely kind. And like you look at her and you understand that those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And she believes in some bullshit stuff, but also she really doesn't. But also she's kind of afraid that she doesn't believe that, because her whole life is built on fiction, because she's paraplegic and she's like tied to a wheelchair. And obviously her life is very limited. And like, it's a ball of contradictions. And I really love how, like, it's played very straight. You aren't meant to laugh at her. You aren't meant to pity her. You are meant to empathize with her
We're doing
as a
well with that
person.
word, aren't we, today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have issues with empathy, don't I?
Yeah.
So like I think it's very interesting. Pleasance is a less important character, but it's kind of the same with her.
Yeah.
And my third favorite character would again, okay, so I really like it's not about the character. I really like the dynamic between Titus and Clausia. Because I did feel kind of uncomfortable with a man accusing someone of being a rape victim for maybe the wrong reasons, because he kind of wants her to be the victim, but she kind of is, but she's in denial about this, but she puts on the strong facade of not being a victim. But then again, it's not facade, she really genuinely doesn't care, because she's just that nihilistic that it maybe wasn't rape and maybe wasn't, and it's very complicated. And Titus, who's a bit of a simpler man, is annoyed at that, because it would be so much easier for him to just see her as a victim to save. And he kind of wants what's best for her, but he also wants her to fit in a role for him to be her savior. And he kind of becomes really misogynistic when she doesn't fit in that role. But again, not as misogynistic as some other characters, because he still comes from a good place, but he also says that, yeah, all women are bitches. And like, I really like how that whole dynamic drags out both the best and the worst from them both. It's a very, very complicated relationship. It's really, really well written. Like, I enjoy. Can I say that they are my favorite characters? Not necessarily, but that specific interaction is very interesting.
Yeah.
So my one favorite character is the Phasmid, of course, because, and I'm not joking, portraying in this very weird world that has a lot of fictional elements, portraying the miraculous as a giant insect that's kind of ugly, I mean, it's both beautiful and ugly. It's not conventionally pretty. It's not like a fairy with wings or whatever. It was a brilliant solution, and it's absolutely the highest emotional point in the game and in all of gaming, maybe.
I
I'm not
agree.
sure.
No, I agree. I think it's monumental, and I like all of what you said there. I think that's some of the most fascinating perspectives we've had on Human Opener, actually, particularly the Titus one. I'd never thought about it that way. Maybe that's because I'm a horrible male of the species, and I don't think about things in much more complicated ways than I should. But that's a fascinating perspective you've offered, and yeah, the Phasmid, I think you're right to point out. Yeah, it's not conventional beauty, but the moment is so undeniably beautiful that it doesn't matter what the actual Phasmid itself looks like, because you're just in complete wonder at the fact that because you're led like down this path of how ridiculous the idea of it being, and at that point you completely resign to the fact that it can't possibly be real. There's been so many signs pointing towards it, and then it is. And when Kim says, "I see it too," and you realise that you haven't gone completely insane, it's beautiful. What would your personal signature skill be?
Rhetoric.
Yeah, I thought you'd say that because you'd said it earlier.
Yeah, well, I have the rhetoric flair on the Reddit, on the Disco Elysium Reddit, and
okay.
I so like I really love how every Disco Elysium skill has this sort of quality. If you have too much of it, it kind of starts bossing you around. And with rhetoric, it's being that actually guy, and I am that guy sometimes.
It's also the skill of communism, and insists that communism has a smell, and there's like a whole argument between rhetoric. Perception is saying there's no olfactory connection to communism, like you're talking absolute shit, and rhetoric says no. Actually, it's it definitely is.
Well, yeah, I do like arguing for the sake of arguing sometimes, and like finding arguments in favor of a ridiculous proposition is fun. It's a fun intellectual endeavor.
Yeah.
I may get carried away with it sometimes.
Yeah. I'm scared to say the word favorite now, and it's in almost all of my questions, so forgive me. Was there a particular quest or subplot that you really enjoyed?
Not going to try and play original there. The worker woman quest was the one that destroyed me on my first playthrough.
Yeah.
It's just holy shit, the writing.
Yeah, it's
It's not
unbelievable,
even.
isn't it?
Like there were a lot of lofty words from me today about like unusual and complicated experience and how we can use game design to create them and stuff like that. And the Worker Woman quest is not one of them. It's just an incredibly well written story created by someone who understands human character very, very, very well and understands how to present it. But like, that's all I needed.
Yeah, I think on so many aspects, actually, it understands the human spirit very well. Like even when you find the body of the husband, it talks through some of the mindset of an alcoholic, and talks about how he took the books to the library. He's got his cool jacket on. He's earned that beer, and then obviously the tragic events that unfold from there. Yeah, and we all know. I think everybody who's played Disco Elysium has wept at that moment. It's fantastic writing. Is there a particular? See how I'm trying to avoid the word favourite now. Do you have a favourite quote from the game?
Well, if you say 2 days, maybe it will be etched into your mind forever.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I mean, it's just ouch. I do remember a lot of quotes from the game, and the one about capital that it gets quoted every time now because of how the studio
Yeah.
case went is actually something I didn't think about before. So it was kind of enlightening to me, and I do think this quote is very succinct. Um, okay, so it's a bit navel-gazy, but I do remember the communist quest that I translated in Russian by heart because I think the English prose is very poetic there. I mean, the rhetoric quest, the starting quest about like how communism fell. The original one, not the one from the DLC, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because it's very poetic. It's just the prose is extremely well written.
Yeah.
I do remember most of the dialogue with the Phasmid by heart again. Just extremely great writing, very, very poignant. Like, okay, it may sound funny, but I do feel that if angels existed, a conversation with an angel would go something like that. Because it is an incredible conversation with a life form that's both real and alien to you, and like it doesn't understand your issues. It's incapable of understanding them. It's just captured really well.
Yeah, the whole I exist, tell me what it's like for you, and the Phasmid just kind of explains that. Well, actually, no. My whole world basis is like sugar, reward, and just receptacles, and just like breathing the air and stuff. And to your point about like humans, how they have this unique gift of being able to live through different lives that a living creature like the Phasmid just doesn't. So yeah, it's very very fascinating.
Yeah,
Um,
and the dialogue with the Phasmid is exactly what kind of got me thinking about humanity, about that. Exactly, the game presents to you that here is a creature that only exists within itself.
mhm.
And you don't understand, a human behind the computer, that you exist in someone else's skin right now, in Harry's skin. And a Phasmid or a cockroach or a dog can't do that. And okay, again, sounds funny, but it is genuinely profound for me.
Yeah. Was there last two questions? Was there a political vision quest that you enjoyed the most?
I think they're all well written. I think they're all funny. I think they're all very, like snappy and biting.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that the Communist quest is the most poetic. I'm not a fan of the DLC's expanded quests. They didn't add much for me.
Okay.
But from the original quest/dialogues, I do like the Communist one the best, just because it's the best written, and because so I think this is the most unexpected critique. All how do I put it? All other ideologies are kind of stupid. Okay, so fascism and liberalism are kind of stupid. I
Yep.
mean, in a good way. They're silly. Okay,
Yeah.
they're being comic reliefs. The moralism one is because it's probably the closest for me personally. I'm a boring person. In that regard, it is satiric but reasonable. But the communist one is genuinely poetic. It's like you're reading a poem, And so criticizing communism for the fact that it's like good idea, absolutely unfeasible, has no connection to reality, but like it's the thought that counts.
Yeah.
It's actually an interesting angle of critique because again, in the post-Soviet space, you get a lot of people criticizing communism for like the crimes of communism, for Stalin and whatever, for the wars, for the repressions, for anything, or like for poverty, for the fall of the USSR, for how it was not a feasible economic system. Basically, I've lived my whole life hearing a lot of criticism of communism. And I feel that the way that Disco Elysium criticizes communism is a breath of fresh air. It's interesting for me because it criticizes it for completely different reasons.
Yeah. Great answers. And one final one. Is there anything that you would have changed or you are critical of in the game?
Yeah, unpopular question. Or maybe no, I don't know. Doesn't matter. I didn't like the ending. And actually, it's kind of two-stage. So I do remember my first experience playing the game. When you found the 2mm hole in the world, I was absolutely sure that the murder mystery will kind of play second fiddle to the mystery of the hole in the world because it seems way more important than someone dying.
Yeah.
And so if this setting of Disco Elysium was only invented for this particular game and wasn't a broader setting for a number of works of fiction, I feel that it was that narratively that would be a moment where the game would go like, okay, so the murder is not important. You need to figure out how this world works. And Harry sort of kind of does that a bit, but not really. And it ends up so the 2mm hole in the world does play a role. It explains your amnesia. It explains a number of things. It is tied into the story, but it never becomes the main bit. But it felt like one when I encountered it.
Yeah.
It felt like it should be more important than everything else. And it's the same with the ending. I understand what they were going after. I know the story. I did know the story of the soldier who thought that the war was going on before I played Disco Elysium. I understand that it's about ideology and how, like the legacy of the past coming back to bite you in the ass. But it was also a good murder mystery up until that point, and I was disappointed that the murderer was just some random guy that we got introduced to in like the final act of the game. It was it felt a bit flat for me. So I do think Disco Elysium is genius. Please understand that I'm only answering your question and I'm not coming from the point of like active criticism, but I would prefer if the game also worked as a brilliant murder mystery as well.
Yeah. Yep, I don't have an argument against that. I had mixed feelings on the ending myself, and you're right. The 2mm hole in the world did seem like a much more important issue for everybody to be resolving because it was an existential crisis rather than, just keeping Kim happy and making sure we got the job done right. Okay, that is my final question, Alphyna. I have a huge thanks to you for giving me so much of your time. You have been an absolute joy to talk to. It's been amazing to hear your answers to these questions. Fascinating mind that you've got locked between those ears. I can't wait to see what it produces now that you are taking a leading role on Pathologic 3. I think we're all excited to see what Ice Pick Lodge do next with that. Yeah, thank you very much for your time, and that's another episode of Human Can Opener.
Thank you very much for your time and for the wonderful questions. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Amazing. Okay, folks, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.